The war room fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life above the conference table. Captain Hansol stood with his arms crossed, watching the alien figures materialize before Earth's military command. He had seen many things during the Unification Wars, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Coalition. Their ambassador, a thin creature with translucent skin and 4 delicate arms, spoke through a translation device that made its voice sound like wind chimes. It told them about a threat that was consuming the galaxy, world by world, system by system. The Vaxier swarm had no mercy. They were not interested in negotiation or peace. They simply consumed everything in their path, turning entire civilizations into fuel for their endless hunger. The coalition had fought them for 30 years and was losing badly. Hansol studied the faces of his fellow officers. Some looked excited, others worried. Dr. Yuna, the xenobiologist sitting 2 seats down, couldn't stop smiling. She had dreamed of this day since she was a child, the day humanity would meet other intelligent life. But Hansol saw something else in the ambassador's large eyes: desperation. The alien continued speaking, painting beautiful pictures with its words. It talked about humanity joining a great community of worlds, sharing knowledge and culture, advancing together into a bright future. It spoke of the honor of defending civilization itself, of standing shoulder to shoulder with species from across the stars. Commander Taemin leaned forward. He was younger than Hansol, ambitious and eager. "What exactly would Earth's role be in this alliance?" he asked. The ambassador's skin changed color slightly, a pale blue washing across its surface. "Your people are remarkably strong," it said. "Your world is what we call a death world. The gravity, the atmospheric pressure, the very air you breathe would kill most coalition species within minutes. You have evolved to survive conditions we can barely imagine." Hansol felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard that word before, in the preliminary reports. Death world. It sounded dramatic, almost flattering. But something about the way the ambassador said it bothered him. "We need warriors," the alien continued. "Soldiers who can fight where we cannot. The Vaxier swarm operates on high-gravity worlds, in conditions that break our bones and crush our organs. But for you, such places would be merely uncomfortable." The room erupted in discussion. Earth's generals saw opportunity. With alien technology, humanity could leap forward centuries in development. They could cure diseases, extend lifespans, explore the galaxy. All they had to do was send soldiers to fight a war that wasn't even theirs. Dr. Yuna was practically bouncing in her seat. "This is incredible," she whispered to Hansol. "Think of what we could learn from them. Medicine, engineering, physics. Everything would change." Hansol nodded slowly, but his gut told him something was wrong. He had seen politicians make promises before. Beautiful words that meant nothing when the fighting started. Over the next 3 months, Earth's governments debated. The coalition sent more ambassadors, more promises. They showed videos of their beautiful worlds, their advanced cities, their peaceful societies. They promised humanity full membership in their council, equal voting rights, and unlimited access to their technology. The decision was made. Earth would send 50,000 soldiers to join the coalition forces. It seemed like a small number compared to Earth's billions, but the coalition assured them it would be enough. Human soldiers, they said, were worth 10 of any other species. Hansol was chosen to lead the expeditionary force. He handpicked his officers, men and women he had fought beside during Earth's darkest days. Lieutenant Hei-Wan, a medic who had saved more lives than anyone could count. Young Ji-Woo, barely 22, but already a veteran of 3 campaigns. These were people he trusted with his life. The day of departure arrived. Han Solo stood on the parade ground, watching his 50,000 soldiers stand at attention. They were the best humanity had to offer. They believed they were going to save the galaxy, to prove that Earth deserved its place among the stars. The Coalition provided transport ships, massive vessels that seemed too delicate to actually fly. Human engineers marveled at the technology, but noted that everything seemed designed for beings much smaller and weaker than humans. The ships had low ceilings, narrow corridors, and gravity generators set to barely half of Earth's standard. As they loaded equipment, Han Solo noticed something else. The weapons and armor the Coalition provided were old, clearly outdated even by their own standards. When he asked about this, a Coalition officer waved away his concerns. "These are perfectly adequate for fighting the Vaxir," it said. "We simply don't have our newest equipment to spare right now." Dr. Yuna came to see them off. She hugged Han Solo tightly. "Come back safe," she said, "and bring back stories. I want to hear everything about the worlds you see." Han Solo forced a smile. "I'll do my best." The journey to the front lines took 6 weeks. During that time, Han Solo tried to learn as much as possible about the Coalition and the Vaxir. He studied tactical reports and battle recordings. What he saw troubled him deeply. Coalition forces had superior numbers and technology, but they fought like they were afraid of getting hurt. They avoided close combat, retreated at the first sign of serious resistance, and seemed more concerned with preserving their own lives than actually winning battles. The Vaxir, by contrast, were relentless. They threw themselves at Coalition positions without fear, overwhelming defenses through sheer determination. They could survive in environments that would kill most Coalition species, which gave them a massive strategic advantage. Han Solo began to understand what the Coalition really wanted from humanity. They didn't want allies or equals. They wanted someone else to die in their place. When they finally arrived at the front, Han Solo's fears were confirmed. The Coalition general who greeted them, a tall creature with too many joints in its limbs, didn't even pretend to respect them. It gave them orders like they were servants, assigned them the most dangerous positions, and made it clear that human lives were expendable. That first night, Han Solo stood on the observation deck of their base, looking out at the alien sky. Somewhere out there, the Vaxir were coming. Behind him, 50,000 humans prepared for a war they didn't understand, trusting promises that were already broken. Tae-min joined him at the window. "You're worried," he said. It wasn't a question. Han Solo nodded. "We made a mistake coming here." "Then what do we do?" Han Solo was quiet for a long moment. "We survive," he finally said. "We keep our people alive and we learn everything we can, because I have a feeling we're going to need it." The first battle happened 3 days after they arrived. Han Solo received orders at dawn to take his forces and secure a mining colony on a high-gravity moon. The Coalition claimed it was strategic, essential for the war effort. They promised air support, medical evacuation, and reinforcements if things went bad. None of those promises were kept. Ji-Woo crouched behind a broken wall, his rifle hot in his hands. Around him, the Vaxir swarm moved like a living tide, their chittering calls echoing across the ruined colony. They were insect-like creatures, each one the size of a large dog, with mandibles that could tear through metal. "Contact left!" someone shouted, and Ji-Woo spun, firing in controlled bursts. The Vaxir fell, but 3 more took its place. He had been fighting for 6 hours straight, and his ammunition was running low. Where was the air support? Where were the reinforcements? Lieutenant Haiwan worked frantically in what used to be the colony's medical center. Wounded soldiers lay everywhere, some screaming, others ominously silent. She had training and skill, but she was running out of supplies. The Coalition had promised advanced medical equipment, regeneration technology that could heal almost any wound. Instead, she had bandages and basic painkillers. A young soldier, barely 19, grabbed her arm. His legs were gone below the knees, severed by Vaxier mandibles. "Am I going to die?" he asked, his voice surprisingly calm. HFY wanted to lie, to comfort him, but she couldn't. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I'm going to try my best to save you." She worked on him for 20 minutes, doing everything she could with what little she had. When his heart finally stopped, she closed his eyes and moved to the next patient. There was no time for grief, no time for anger. That would come later. By the time Han Solo's forces secured the colony, 32% of his soldiers were casualties. Over 1,500 dead or seriously wounded in a single engagement. The Vaxier had been driven off, but at a terrible cost. The coalition general congratulated him on the victory. It called the casualties acceptable losses and immediately gave him orders for the next assault. Over the following months, the pattern repeated. Human forces were sent into the worst combat zones with inadequate support. Coalition units stayed back, providing only token assistance. When things got dangerous, they retreated, leaving humans to fight alone. Han Solo watched his numbers dwindle. 50,000 became 40,000, then 30,000. His soldiers fought brilliantly, adapting to alien environments and enemies with impressive speed. They were winning their battles, but they were bleeding out in the process. Tae Min came to him one night, his face grim. "I've been monitoring coalition communications," he said quietly. "You need to hear this." He played a recording. Coalition officers speaking among themselves, thinking no humans were listening. Their words were casual, almost bored. "How are the Deathworlders performing?" "Better than expected. They're quite effective at absorbing Vaxier attacks." "Excellent. The longer they hold the front lines, the more time we have to consolidate our core territories." "Do you think they've realized yet that we're using them as shields?" Laughter. Actual laughter. "It doesn't matter if they do. They're too far from their home world to do anything about it. By the time they figure out they're expendable, they'll all be dead anyway." Han Solo listened to the entire recording in silence. When it finished, he sat motionless for a long time. Tae Min waited, knowing better than to speak. "How many people have heard this?" Han Solo finally asked. "Just me and the technician who intercepted it. I came to you first. Keep it that way for now. I need to think." But there was little time for thinking. The next day, orders came for the largest offensive yet. 20,000 human soldiers were to assault a Vaxier stronghold on a toxic world where the atmosphere itself was poisonous. Coalition forces would provide supporting fire from orbit. Han Solo had no choice but to obey. Refusing orders would mean court-martial, and he couldn't help his people from a prison cell. So he sent them into hell one more time, praying he was wrong about what he suspected. He wasn't wrong. The assault began at dawn. Human forces fought their way through Vaxier defenses with brutal efficiency, taking massive casualties but making steady progress. They were winning, pushing the Vaxier back despite overwhelming odds. Then the coalition forces withdrew. No warning, no explanation. They simply pulled back their ships and left orbit, abandoning the humans below. Jiwoo watched the sky in disbelief as the coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace. Around him, his squad stood frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. "They left us," someone whispered. "They actually left us." The Vaxier counterattack was immediate and overwhelming. Without orbital support, without evacuation, the human forces were surrounded. HFY worked in a makeshift field hospital, knowing that even if she saved these soldiers, there was nowhere safe to take them. Han Solo tried every communication channel, demanding explanations, begging for support. He got only silence in response. For 3 days, the humans held out. They formed a defensive perimeter, rationed ammunition, and fought off wave after wave of Vaxier attacks. They were some of the best soldiers Earth had ever produced, and they refused to give up even when hope was gone. On the third night, Taemin managed to tap into a coalition communication network. What he heard made his blood run cold. The coalition wasn't coming back. They had written off the humans as dead, acceptable losses in the war effort. In fact, they considered the operation a success, because the Vaxir had wasted resources destroying the human force instead of attacking coalition worlds. Taemin found Hansol on the defensive line, directing fire against another Vaxir assault. He pulled him aside and told him everything. Hansol looked at his soldiers, these people who had trusted Earth's government, trusted the coalition, trusted him. He had led them here to be sacrificed, like animals. "Get me a ship," he said quietly. "Any ship that still flies. I don't care how small." "What are you planning?" "We're going home. However many of us survive this. We're going home. And the coalition is going to regret they ever heard of humanity." On the fourth day, a miracle happened. A coalition supply ship jumped into the system, apparently unaware of the situation. Hansol's forces shot out its engines before it could escape and boarded it. The crew surrendered without a fight, shocked that humans would dare attack them. Hansol stood on the bridge of the captured ship, looking at the coalition crew huddled together in fear. "You're going to help us get out of here," he told them. "And if you're smart, you'll pray we make it. Because if we die, there are billions more humans back on Earth who will want to know what happened to us." Haywan counted their numbers as they evacuated the planet. Out of 20,000 who had landed, fewer than 4,000 made it off. The rest lay dead in alien soil, sacrificed for a cause that was never theirs. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the battlefield behind, Ji-Woo sat alone in the cargo bay. He thought about his friends who hadn't made it, about the promises that had been lies from the beginning. He wasn't the only one thinking about revenge. Across the ship, 15,000 survivors of humanity's expeditionary force came to the same realization. The coalition had betrayed them, used them, and thrown them away. That was a mistake the galaxy would learn to regret. The captured coalition ship, renamed Defiance by its new human crew, limped through space toward neutral territory. Hansol knew they needed time to repair, resupply, and figure out exactly how to get back to Earth, which was 3 months away at their current speed. The coalition crew remained under guard, but unharmed. Hansol wasn't interested in revenge against individuals who had just been doing their jobs. His anger was reserved for the leadership that had orchestrated humanity's betrayal. Chief Engineer Kyung-soo worked around the clock in the ship's engine room. He was a genius with machines, able to understand complex systems with just a glance. The coalition technology was advanced, but not incomprehensible. Within days, he had mapped out most of the ship's critical systems. "This is interesting," he told Hansol during a briefing. "Their technology is impressive, but it's not designed for efficiency. It's designed to be easy. Everything is automated, simplified for species that apparently never had to work with their hands." Hansol raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning we can improve it. Human engineering principles, applied to alien technology, could make this ship twice as effective." That gave Hansol an idea. "What if we could access their technology database, learn how all this works?" Kyung-soo grinned. "I was hoping you'd ask that." They interrogated the coalition crew, looking for information about nearby installations. One of them, a junior officer clearly terrified of the humans, mentioned a research station 3 days away. It was minimally defended, housing scientists rather than soldiers. Sergeant Da-Yun led the boarding party. She was small but fierce, a veteran of close-quarters combat who had survived more battles than most soldiers twice her age. She chose 20 of the best fighters among the survivors and prepared for the assault. The research station detected their approach and tried to run. Da Yun's team disabled their engines with precise weapons fire, then docked forcefully, cutting through the station's hull with tools they had improvised from salvaged equipment. The Coalition scientists surrendered immediately. They weren't warriors, and the sight of armed humans storming through their station sent them into panic. Da Yun felt almost bad about how easy it was. In the station's data core, they found everything: complete technical specifications for Coalition ships, weapons, medical technology, and navigation systems. Kyung-soo called it the biggest intelligence coup in human history. But there was something else in those files: communications between Coalition leadership discussing the human deployment. Han Sol read them with growing rage. The betrayal had been planned from the beginning. The Coalition never intended to honor their promises. They had calculated exactly how many human casualties would be acceptable, how long they could use Earth's soldiers before they ran out. There were even cost-benefit analyses, comparing the value of human lives against the strategic advantage of using them as shock troops. One message made Han Sol's hands shake with fury. A Coalition admiral discussing the plan to blockade Earth once the human soldiers were all dead to prevent any retaliation. "We'll simply tell them their heroes died bravely," the admiral had written. "By the time they discover the truth, we'll have enough forces around their system to ensure compliance." Han Sol gathered his officers and showed them the files. The room fell silent as they read. "They were going to trap Earth," Taemin said quietly. "Use us up, then make sure our homeworld couldn't do anything about it." "We're going to," Han Sol corrected. "But we're not dead yet. And now we know their plan." He turned to his communications officer. "Can you send a message to Earth? Something the Coalition can't intercept?" "Maybe. If we route it through this station's equipment and bounce it off a few neutral systems. It might work, but it'll take time. Do it. Earth needs to know what's coming." While they worked on the message, Coalition forces finally caught up with them. 3 warships jumped into the system, demanding the humans surrender immediately. Their commander, speaking over the communications channel, promised fair treatment and safe return to Earth. Everyone on the bridge knew it was a lie. "We can't fight 3 warships," Taemin said, "even with the improvements Kyung-soo has made." Da-un studied the tactical display. "We don't have to fight them all at once. The station has defensive weapons. What if we activate them?" It was risky, but they had few options. Kyung-soo linked the station's weapon systems to their ship's controls. When the Coalition vessels moved to attack, they suddenly found themselves taking fire from the station they thought was still under their control. In the confusion, Da-un led another boarding party. They used small shuttles to approach the nearest Coalition warship, attaching to its hull in blind spots where weapons couldn't track them. Then they cut their way inside. The Coalition crew was completely unprepared for boarders. They had weapons but no experience using them. Most surrendered immediately when they saw armed humans coming through the corridors. Ji-woo was part of that boarding party. He moved through the alien ship with his squad, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. In one compartment, they found Coalition Marines suiting up to repel boarders. The aliens moved slowly, clumsily, weighed down by armor that looked heavy even in the ship's low gravity. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. The Coalition Marines were brave enough, but they had never trained for close combat. They didn't know how to fight someone who could move faster, hit harder, and take more damage than they could. Within an hour, the humans controlled 2 ships. The third fled, jumping to hyperspace before Da-un could organize another boarding party. Han Sol now commanded a small fleet. They had weapons, supplies, and most importantly, knowledge. Kyung-soo immediately began reverse engineering everything, teaching other engineers how Coalition technology worked. The message to Earth finally went through. Han Sol kept it simple. Betrayed by Coalition. Massive casualties. They plan blockade of Earth. Prepare for war. sending all technical data. Survive at all costs. With the message went everything they had learned, every technical specification, every tactical report. It would take weeks to reach Earth, but when it did, humanity would know the truth. The journey home became a running battle. Coalition forces tried to stop them at every system. Some attacks were half-hearted, as if the aliens couldn't quite believe humans would dare to fight back. Others were serious attempts to destroy them. The humans won every engagement, not because they had better ships or weapons, but because they refused to give up. They fought with a desperation and ferocity that the coalition couldn't match. Ji-Woo earned a reputation among the crew. In battle after battle, he was always at the front, always pushing forward. Other soldiers started calling him the Blade because he cut through enemy formations like a knife through paper. Haewon saved lives that should have been impossible to save. Working with captured coalition medical technology, she learned to use their regeneration systems, improving them with human medical knowledge. Coalition doctors used their technology carefully, afraid of side effects. Haewon pushed it to its limits because her patients didn't have time for caution. 6 months after leaving the battlefield where the coalition had abandoned them, 15,000 survivors finally reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system. They were battered, exhausted, and running on fumes. But they had made it home. What they found there shocked them. Earth's orbit was filled with ships, hundreds of them under construction. The planet below blazed with industrial activity, factories running day and night. Their warning had arrived, and humanity had responded. Han Sol stood on the bridge of his captured ship, looking at his homeworld. "We're not victims anymore," he said quietly. "We're not the Coalition's disposable soldiers. From now on, we're something else entirely." Taemin stood beside him. "What's that?" "A threat they should have killed when they had the chance." Dr. Yuna stood in the newly constructed war room deep beneath Seoul, surrounded by screens showing data from across the solar system. She looked different now, harder. The excitement she had felt at first contact seemed like a lifetime ago. When Han Sol's message had arrived 8 months earlier, Earth had erupted in fury. The truth about the Coalition's betrayal spread across every network, every news channel, every social media platform. Humanity learned that their soldiers had been used as cannon fodder, that 35,000 had died in a war that was never theirs, and that the Coalition was planning to trap Earth in its own solar system. The response was immediate and total. Every nation on Earth put aside its differences. Old enemies became allies overnight. Resources that had been wasted on conflicts were redirected toward a single goal: survival. Director Sang-mi coordinated the effort. She was a former industrial engineer who had made her reputation building impossible projects ahead of schedule. Now she faced the most impossible project of all, preparing an entire planet for war against an interstellar civilization. "Show me the production numbers," she said, and the screens changed to display graphs and statistics. In the 8 months since receiving Han Sol's warning, Earth had built 200 warships. They were crude compared to Coalition vessels, but they were designed by humans for humans. High gravity, heavy acceleration, thick armor. The Coalition built ships for comfort. Humans built them to survive. Kyung-soo, who had returned with the survivors, led the engineering teams. He took Coalition technology and made it better, mixing alien science with human ingenuity. Coalition ships used antimatter reactors designed to be safe and stable. Human ships pushed those reactors to twice their rated output, accepting the risk for the power gain. The Coalition treated their technology like it was fragile, Kyung-soo explained during a briefing. "They never pushed limits, never experimented. We're not that cautious." Admiral Bo-ram commanded Earth's growing fleet. She was a Navy veteran who had fought in the Pacific conflicts before Earth's unification. She understood tactics, strategy, and most importantly, she understood that humanity was playing catch-up. "We can't match them ship for ship," she said. They have thousands of vessels, maybe tens of thousands. We have 200 and growing. We need to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless. She studied Coalition battle tactics, watching recordings that Han Solo had brought back. What she saw gave her hope. The Coalition fought like they were afraid of casualties, pulling back the moment things got dangerous. They relied on overwhelming numbers and superior technology, assuming that would be enough. They fight like they've never been truly threatened, Bo-Ram said. They're soft. We can use that. Dr. Yuna focused on something different. She studied Coalition biology, learning everything she could about the species that had betrayed humanity. What she discovered was disturbing. Every Coalition species came from low-gravity worlds with stable, peaceful environments. They had evolved intelligence without significant predation, without constant warfare. Violence was alien to them on a fundamental level. Humans were different. Humanity had evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill them, surrounded by predators, competing with each other for resources. Humans were persistence hunters who could track prey for days, endurance athletes who could run until their bodies literally began destroying themselves, and tribal creatures who formed bonds strong enough to die for. We're not just physically stronger, Yuna explained to Sang-Mi. We're psychologically different. They see violence as a last resort, something to avoid. We see it as a tool, something to use when necessary. That gives us an advantage they can't compensate for with technology. But Earth's preparations went beyond military might. Sang-Mi ordered the construction of massive shipyards in the outer solar system, hidden behind asteroid fields and radiation belts. She established supply depots, weapons platforms, and sensor networks throughout human space. Most importantly, she prepared for the blockade everyone knew was coming. The Coalition arrived exactly when Han Solo's intercepted messages said they would. 3 months after the survivors returned to Earth, a fleet of 50 Coalition warships jumped into the solar system. Their commander broadcast a message to Earth, demanding surrender and the return of all stolen technology. Admiral Bo-Ram's response was short and profane. The Coalition established a blockade, positioning ships at key points around Earth's solar system. They were confident, almost casual about it. 50 warships seemed like overwhelming force against a primitive species that had only recently developed space travel. They didn't know about the hidden shipyards, the weapons platforms, or the 300 warships Earth had actually built. Bo-Ram let them get comfortable, let them relax into their blockade positions. She monitored their communications, learning their protocols and procedures. She waited for exactly the right moment. On the bridge of humanity's flagship, Vengeance, Bo-Ram gave the order. All ships, break cover. Show them what we've built. Across the solar system, stealth fields dropped. 300 warships that had been hiding in the black suddenly became visible, their weapons hot and ready. The Coalition fleet found itself suddenly outnumbered 6-1. The Coalition commander tried to negotiate, tried to explain that there had been misunderstandings, that they could reach an agreement. Bo-Ram cut him off. "You used our soldiers as shields," she said coldly. "You left them to die. You plan to trap us here, to make us your slaves. There will be no negotiation. Leave our system now, or we'll destroy every one of your ships." The Coalition fleet tried to fight. It was a mistake. Human ships weren't designed for elegant space combat. They were built to ram, to endure, to get close and tear the enemy apart. Coalition captains tried their standard tactics, maintaining distance and using superior sensors to attack from range. Human ships didn't care about taking damage. They accelerated at forces that would kill Coalition crews, pulling maneuvers that should have torn their own ships apart. They closed the distance and fired weapons at point-blank range. Kyung-Soo's modifications made the difference. Human reactors could output more power, human engines could push harder, human weapons could fire faster. And when Coalition ships damaged human vessels, human crews didn't retreat to repair. They kept fighting. Jiwoo commanded one of the new warships, a destroyer called Retribution. He had been promoted rapidly, recognized for his leadership during the fighting retreat. Now he led 300 crew into battle, showing them that the coalition could bleed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 30 coalition ships were destroyed or captured. The remaining 20 fled, jumping to hyperspace in panic. Earth had won its first defensive battle, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. In the days after the battle, Sang-mi addressed the planet. Her speech was broadcast on every channel, translated into every language. She stood before the camera, her face tired but determined. The coalition came here to blockade us, to trap us, to punish us for having the audacity to survive their betrayal, she said. They failed, but they'll come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination. So we need to be ready. Every factory, every shipyard, every person on this planet needs to be prepared for what's coming. This isn't someone else's war anymore. This is ours. Han Sol watched the speech from Earth's surface, standing with the other survivors. They had come home as defeated soldiers, expecting to find a world unprepared for what was coming. Instead, they found a world that had united, that had built an army, that had decided to fight. "What do you think?" Tae-min asked. Han Sol looked up at the night sky, knowing that somewhere up there, the coalition was regrouping, planning their next move. "I think they made a mistake," he said. "They had a chance to leave us alone, to pretend we didn't exist. Instead, they woke us up. They showed us exactly what they were. And now they're going to learn what happens when you betray a death world." Admiral Han Sol stood before the Council of Earth, his uniform pressed and perfect, his face showing no emotion. The past 2 years had aged him, turned his hair gray and carved lines deep into his face, but his eyes were still sharp, still burning with purpose. "The Deathworlder fleet is ready," he reported. 500 warships fully armed and crewed. We have supply lines established, intelligence networks throughout Coalition space, and most importantly, we have a plan. The council consisted of representatives from every major nation. They had governed Earth's transformation from a divided world into a unified military power. Now they faced the hardest decision humanity had ever made. "What's the casualty estimate?" asked the Chinese representative. Han Sol didn't hesitate. "If we attack the coalition capital directly, we'll likely lose 30 to 40% of our fleet. If they're prepared, possibly more. But we'll win. Our ships are better, our crews are better, and they're still not used to fighting opponents who can actually hurt them." The Russian representative leaned forward. "And if we don't attack? If we just defend our system? Then we're trapped here forever. The coalition has hundreds of member species and thousands of worlds. Given time, they'll build enough ships to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Our only chance is to strike now, while we have the advantage of surprise and momentum." Ambassador Hyo-jin spoke next. She had been appointed to negotiate with any coalition species willing to talk, though so far, none had been. "There's another option. We could demand justice without invasion, war crimes tribunals for coalition leadership, reparations for our dead, and a treaty guaranteeing Earth's independence." Han Sol shook his head. "They'll never agree. They still don't see us as equals, just as problems to be managed. The only way to get justice is to take it." The vote was close, but in the end, the decision was made. Earth would take the war to the coalition. Not for conquest, not for revenge, but to secure humanity's future and to ensure the galaxy never forgot what had been done. The Deathworlder fleet assembled in orbit, the largest concentration of military power humanity had ever created. 500 warships, each one named after those who had died in the coalition's betrayal. The flagship was called the 35,000, honoring every human soldier who hadn't come home. Han Sol walked through the ship's corridors, seeing the crew preparing for departure. They were young, most of them, born into a world at war. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. But among them were veterans of the original expedition, survivors who remembered the betrayal firsthand. Hei Wan served as the fleet's chief medical officer. She had spent 2 years preparing for mass casualties, training thousands of medics, designing field hospitals that could deploy on alien worlds. She hoped her preparations would be unnecessary but knew better. Ji Woo commanded a destroyer squadron, 10 ships under his direct control. At 25, he was one of the youngest squadron commanders in the fleet. But he had earned his rank through blood and fire, proving himself in every battle Earth had fought. Kyung-soo remained with the engineering teams, but he had sent his designs with the fleet, human weapons that pushed alien technology beyond its theoretical limits, engines that could outrun anything the Coalition had, shields that could withstand punishment that would vaporize Coalition vessels. The journey to the Coalition capital took 3 weeks. Along the way, they encountered Coalition patrols. Some fled immediately, recognizing human ships and wanting no part of the fight. Others tried to stop them and were destroyed quickly, efficiently. News of the fleet's approach spread through Coalition space like wildfire. Some species, those who had been marginalized or mistreated by Coalition leadership, quietly cheered. Others, comfortable in their positions of power, demanded action. The Coalition capital was a massive space station orbiting a beautiful blue world. It housed representatives from every member species, a symbol of unity and cooperation. Or at least, that was what it was supposed to represent. In reality, it was where the powerful decided the fate of the weak. Han Sol brought his fleet into the system and established orbit around the station. No Coalition ships moved to intercept them. They simply didn't have enough forces present to stop 500 human warships. From the station, panicked communications flooded every channel. Demands for the humans to leave, threats of retaliation, pleas for negotiation. Han Sol ignored all of it until he received a message from the Coalition Council itself, requesting a formal meeting. "They want to talk," Taemin said. "Finally. They want to stall while they gather reinforcements," Han Sol corrected. "But we'll give them their meeting." Ambassador Hyojin accompanied him to the station, along with 15 soldiers. These were special soldiers, survivors of the original expedition who had volunteered for this duty. They called themselves the Silent 15, and they never spoke in public. They simply stood, a living reminder of those who couldn't. The Coalition Council chamber was designed to be impressive, with soaring ceilings and holographic displays showing all the member worlds. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their assigned seats, their forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely alien. Han Sol walked to the center of the chamber, the Silent 15 behind him. He didn't bow, didn't show any sign of respect or deference. He simply stood and waited. The council speaker, an elderly representative from one of the founding species, addressed him with what sounded like forced calm. "Captain Han Sol, you have violated Coalition space and threatened our capital. This is an act of war." "Admiral Han Sol," he corrected. "And you're right. This is an act of war. The war you started when you betrayed humanity." The chamber erupted in noise, representatives shouting over each other. The speaker called for order, eventually restoring quiet. "We offered your species a chance to join civilized society," the speaker said. "We gave you technology, knowledge, and the opportunity to fight for a noble cause. That you suffered casualties is tragic, but war always has costs." Han Sol's laugh was cold and bitter. "Costs? You used us as disposable shields. You gave us outdated equipment and sent us into battles you knew we couldn't win. You abandoned us to die and planned to trap our homeworld. Don't pretend this was about noble causes." Hyojin stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Earth has demands. First, The coalition leadership responsible for the betrayal will stand trial for war crimes. Second, reparations will be paid to the families of every soldier who died. Third, a treaty will be signed guaranteeing Earth's complete independence and equal standing with any coalition species. Fourth, all coalition forces will withdraw from human space immediately. And if we refuse? The speaker asked. Han Sol gestured to the screens showing the fleet outside. Then we start destroying ships and infrastructure until you agree. We're not here for conquest. We don't want your worlds or your resources. We want justice. How much you have to suffer before we get it is entirely up to you. The chamber fell silent. The coalition had never been threatened like this before. They had always been the powerful ones, the ones who made demands. Now they faced an opponent who could actually hurt them, and they had no idea how to respond. Before the speaker could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. New contacts were jumping into the system. Lots of them. Taemin checked his datapad, his face going pale. Coalition reinforcements. Over 1,000 ships, jumping in from multiple directions. Han Sol's jaw tightened. The coalition had been stalling after all, gathering every ship they could find. Now they were making their move, trying to overwhelm the human fleet through sheer numbers. But Han Sol had planned for this. He had known the coalition would try something desperate. He activated his communicator, broadcasting to both his fleet and the coalition council. All human ships, defensive formation Alpha. Protect the civilian infrastructure. Do not fire first, but if they attack, show them what Deathworlders do when they're truly angry. He turned back to the council. Your military is about to make a terrible mistake. You still have time to stop them. Because if shooting starts, a lot of your people are going to die. And this time you won't be safe behind the front lines. The speaker stared at him, finally understanding that Han Sol wasn't bluffing, that humans were willing to follow through on every threat they made. The coalition had created an enemy that wouldn't back down, wouldn't be intimidated, and couldn't be easily defeated. Outside, the coalition fleet moved into attack position. On human ships, weapons powered up and crews prepared for battle. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if this would end in negotiation or in blood.